Hang on. Okay. Is this okay now? Does this sound okay? I don't know what's it was working perfectly fine a couple seconds ago. Is it okay now? See, this is real life, guys. I'm sorry. I tested it so many times. Does it sound okay though, or does it sound like it's coming out of my camera? Cuz it's not supposed to be coming out of my camera. It's supposed to be coming out of my microphone. Clay, help me out here. Does it sound bad? I tested it so many times. I don't know what's going on with it. Okay, it sounds okay. Okay, thanks, Alex. Anyways, I apologize. I tested it 4 times. It's a bit loud. Uh, I don't know what's going on. It was working perfectly fine just a little bit ago. Okay. Well, we're gonna work with what we have. I don't know why it's being weird, but I apologize if it's being weird. Some days it's good, some days it's not, but for the most part, it's usually okay. So I don't know why it's being odd. Um, anyways, if I am terribly loud, please turn down your speakers. I don't want to blow your eardrums out. Anywho, okay, so what was I saying? I don't remember. Point is this is a hot button topic for a lot of people. I was homeschooled and I was constantly pushed into the box of being a stereotypical homeschooler who was weird and had no social skills. And whenever somebody would ask me like, "Oh, where do you go to school?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm homeschooled." They would be like, "You're homeschooled, but you're so talkative and you can talk to like adults and anybody and you're so well, I don't know, socialized or whatever." And I'm like, "Yeah, my mom doesn't lock me in a basement 24/7 and make me read I was about to say Homer Simpson. Make me read Little House on the Prairie every like, no, like, I'm quite normal, actually. Anywho, so this is why it's been kind of a difficult decision on whether or not I touch on this subject. Personal experiences. Hey, that's fair. Okay, fine, Clay, you win. Um, but I wanted to kind of go into my own experience of homeschooling and then kind of touch on the school systems today and stuff. So, okay, when I was growing up, my sister went to school. She went to Montessori for a couple of years. And my mom decided she saw how the school system was, she saw how the school system was going, and she saw what happened to her in high school. She saw what happened to my dad in school. And my dad went to Catholic schools, private Catholic schools. And so my parents saw what was going on. And that's when my mom got introduced to homeschooling. Now, I don't know the full story there. I've never really asked, but I know that she got introduced before I was born. So she started homeschooling my sister Katie first. My sister's older than me by 4 years. And for me, being the way that I was, which was very wild, uncontrollable basically, I guarantee you that if I was put into a school system, my spirit would have been broken. I would have been put on drugs to calm me down. I was just a very high energy functioning kid. I liked climbing trees. I had to be outside. I couldn't be indoors. Even when we were doing school inside for homeschooling, I had to do it outside. I needed the sunlight, I needed the wind, I needed to be outdoors at all times basically. I only came in obviously for bedtime and for dinner, but I was outside 90% of my childhood. And being in nature and being able to just get real world experiences through interacting with the world was so beneficial for me because at a very young age, I learned street smarts. And even when we would go out or something, our schooling never really stopped. So let's say we went out to a restaurant, my dad would find a way to implement math, you know? So if we went to a restaurant, we would try to figure out what the tip would be at the end of the dinner or the breakfast or whatever. If we went out to a grocery store, he would be like, "Okay, if this is 20% off, how much money are we saving?" That type of thing. And so I definitely think that helped solidify the math, the science, everything else that I had learned from workbooks. It helped solidify it because I was living it in real time and I was actually using the things I was learning. And then when I got a little bit older, I started getting involved in yes, I'm a theater kid. It's pretty obvious. I don't think I need to explain that any further. I was in music. I played the cello for 10 years. I played piano for 7 years. I started taking voice lessons and I did that for 7 years. And then I taught myself guitar. I've been playing guitar since I was 13. I'm not good at guitar in the sense of like, oh, I'm a guitarist. I play guitar so that I can sing along and it I'm not a great guitarist, but I can get by with some rhythms and some songs that I learn. My technique isn't that great or anything, but I taught myself. So what do you expect? But yeah, I was in orchestra for oh, I started orchestra when I was 13 and I graduated orchestra when I was like 17. So I was in orchestra for quite a while. I was in the youth symphony orchestra and then so you were first in the youth orchestra and then you move on to symphony and I was in that for a really long time. And I looking back on it, when I went, I hated it. I didn't like the teacher all that much, although he didn't give us like the conductor, he didn't give the cellos much of an issue. He gave the bassoons and the trombone, like all of the brass and wind instruments, he threw his baton a few times. It was really funny. Cellos were the angels, though. We could do no wrong. Even when we did do wrong, he'd be yelling at the bassoons and then he'd be like, "Oh, little angels, okay, next time make sure it's on like a 4/4 time and not like 3/8 time or whatever." So he always spoke very kindly to us, but never to any of the other uh, instruments. And then I was also in venturing and I was in sports. So, I was in sports more or less when I was younger. We were in soccer. My sister did softball a couple times, got hit in the head twice. Yeah, it happens. I was in ice skating, and then I tried soccer when I was a little bit older. Didn't really like sports. Didn't I don't know. Sports just never interested me. So my parents also didn't want us to get hurt. So they put us in music instead, hence the cello and piano, etc. So because we were homeschooled, we were able to pursue the things that actually interested us. We weren't forced to learn things that kind of just diminished our light, so to speak, because some kids are forced to learn certain things. And I mean, I think I was technically in my view, I was forced to learn piano because that's just something you start on, that's just the basic instrument, but I wasn't a huge fan of piano. Oftentimes, I couldn't really read music because of my dyslexia, so which doesn't make much sense to me. I don't know how it works, but I had a hard time following along on the page with music, and so I played by ear. And that's not something that a lot of people do these days, and so a lot of teachers didn't know how to work with me because I could listen to a song a couple times and I couldn't perfectly play it, but I could play the melody or I could do something with it, and for the most part, it was correct. So none of the teachers really knew how to work with me. And that was really frustrating for me as a young kid, trying to learn these instruments. And the teachers just are not able to work with me and they don't understand how I'm learning. But being able like to do those things and be homeschooled and have park days and to go on field trips when other kids are stuck in school. And I think some schools are a little better about it now. I know a few schools where some kids get let out early on certain days. I know some schools that give kids more freedom in what they learn or how they learn things. Most part, in my experience and from the experience of other people I've grown up with who have gone to the school system, you really don't have any autonomy in school. You are just told what to do 8 hours during a day, and then you go home and you spend maybe 4 hours with your family if you don't have extracurricular activities. So, to me, that's just recipe for disaster for young kids, especially if they don't have any regulation in their life and it's just constantly being told what to do every single minute of every day and they don't really have time to decompress or relax because 8 hours a day for a kid to be in school, that's like a full-time job. We're expecting little kids to work full-time hours and then not just that, but also take their work home with them. Homework. I A lot of people are mixed on homework. I personally don't think homework is good. I think if the kids should learn what they're gonna learn in school, and if the kids are in school for 6 plus hours, they shouldn't have to do more school outside of school. School should stay in school. So, for me growing up, I was always really excited because I was constantly learning and applying things I was learning, and I was a very difficult child to teach. I could not be tamed, so to speak, and I don't mean that as in like, "Oh, I was just such a wild child, like, you wouldn't believe me." No, I was a nightmare trying to teach. I didn't learn to read until I was much, much older. I didn't learn how to write until I was a lot older either, and most of the things I ended up figuring out for myself out of necessity because finally I relented and I was like, "Fine, okay, I'll learn how to read because I need to know what this box of rice says or something." I don't know, because I started cooking at a young age as well. And so through that, I started realizing there were some necessities that I had to learn, and then that's why I learned them. Now, what I would have done differently in my own homeschooling experience, I would say, um, in my own experience, I definitely wish we would have had more tutors if needed. Um, Not that my mom wasn't qualified to teach us the things that she was teaching us, but I do think at some point it was hard for her to do both my sister and me at the same time. And it would have been very helpful had I think she had a little bit of help to teach us certain subjects that she wasn't as confident in. And that's definitely something I would like to do differently for my own kids because I do plan on homeschooling my own kids in the future. And then another thing is traveling more. I definitely wish we did a lot more traveling. And don't get me wrong, we did travel quite a lot. And I'm sure there was a reason for why we didn't travel a whole bunch. My dad's job and, my mom being busy and everything. But I definitely think traveling is so important for kids to get cultured and to just experience life outside of their little bubble. And I don't mean traveling as in like, "Oh, let's go to Disneyland," or, "Oh, let's go to," you know, I don't know, like Six Flags, or not that kind of travel, but like hiking, camping, um, doing stuff like that because really it doesn't take a whole lot to entertain kids. And we went camping, I think twice a year. My dad used to take us to the Yogi Bear campsite. I think it's in Indiana. And, we used to go there twice or once a year, but I remember we used to go there, like, all the time, and we had our own camper. Travel really isn't that expensive. Especially back when I was a kid, travel was not that expensive, and there were a lot of ways that you could budget, and my family definitely budgeted, hence why we had the camper and we camped instead of stayed in hotels. We stayed at hotels on bigger trips, like family vacation, but we only did that once a year, and my dad always budgeted very well. So for me, growing up, I definitely benefited from traveling a lot and being able to see different things and go to different places. And I was one of those kids that just needed constant change. I needed my room to be a different situation. I needed um I needed there to be change in my scenery, in the music I listened to. I constantly needed change. I didn't do very well as a kid with routine. I definitely think structure is important, but when it came to like strict routines, I failed. So I definitely think that traveling helped me kind of have a change of scenery and become refreshed in that way. So for me, that's just, a part of being homeschooled. Like, and it was interesting because I would have my friends who were in public school or private school or whatever, and they'd text me and they'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing today?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing horseback riding." And then after horseback riding, I have bowling, and then after bowling, I have orchestra, and then after orchestra, I have theater. And they'd be like, "How do you have time for all of that plus school?" And this was in high school. And during high school, I went to a online school. So I could get all of my work done in a week or I could get it done in a month. It didn't really matter. And to an extent, I don't think that that specific school that I went to, um, that kind of structure worked for me. I needed it to be at a weekly basis because I needed a deadline for the projects every week. If I didn't have a deadline every week, a lot of the times I would just let it go to the last minute and then I was overwhelmed. So for me, I think I preferred the weekly deadlines, which I had. I went to Queen of Heaven Academy. I don't know if you guys know that school, but it's an online Catholic school. And my mom actually taught chemistry on there for a little bit. So I graduated from Queen of Heaven Academy in 2016. And all my friends would still just be like, oh my gosh, how do you have time for all of this stuff? And I'm like, oh, well, I just do school while I'm at theater waiting for my time, to go on stage. Or, oh, I just do school while I'm on break at orchestra. There were a multiple ways I could get school done if I wanted to, and it still allowed for me to be creative and to pursue the things that I found very interesting. And a lot of the times, like especially when I was, you know, I was very young when I graduated. I graduated from high school when I was 16. And when you're 16, like what do you want to do? You want to be a bunch of different things. And so when I was 16, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a musical theater major. Yeah, not the best decisions, but for me, that's what I wanted. And as I grew, obviously, then I started pursuing vet tech and then I started pursuing entrepreneurship. And then eventually I landed on a couple other things, but nothing really ever sparked my interest. I was never really interested in college. It wasn't something that I liked. I hated school to begin with. Um, but at that time, I was still pursuing different interests because I could. And it was online, which made it a whole lot easier. And then, yeah, so it was just overall like a good experience being homeschooled. Again, things that I would have changed, absolutely, but that's normal. That's always going to be in hindsight. You're going to look back and be like, oh, I wish we did more of that, or oh, this. But you never know the reasoning behind why you didn't do something or what the situation was back then. Because as a kid, you're not as observant. So I think that for me, I really benefited from homeschooling. And I think a lot of kids would benefit from homeschooling, which is why we're getting into this topic now, which is the school systems. My parents saw how bad the school systems were 20, 30 years ago, and they said, no, we're not letting our kids go through that. We're not, subjecting our kids to that uh, kind of environment, so to speak, that stress, the bullying, all of the crazy stuff. And things are really screwed up. I was reading an article and I have to find it again, but it basically the youngest kids who are having mental illness are 3-year-olds. 3-year-olds are being diagnosed with depression because of the school systems. And people can say, like, oh, it's multiple different reasons. Like, maybe it's because the home life isn't all that good or this or that. I'm like, no, these babies are put into daycare at a very young age because their parents are selfish. And I'm not saying this is all parents because I understand that for some, it is literally the only way they're able to get by, but that's a very rare few. Many are selfish and they could make it work for their kids and they could homeschool their kids if they just learn to budget and they learn to prioritize things differently and they become ordered. But a lot of parents don't. A lot of moms want to pursue a career instead of take care of their family. And unfortunately, the kids suffer with this. And that's why 3-year-olds are now being diagnosed with depression. They haven't even been on this earth for more than 5 years and they're already depressed. Not just that, but just in general, mental illness is through the roof with kids. There's kids identifying as animals, and there are some people that are trying to make that normal, and they're like, oh, well, that's a lot different than like furries, and furries are like reserved for adults. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's disordered. It's not okay for kids to think that they're animals. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And like I mentioned earlier, these poor kids are being sent to basically a full-time job. Not just that, but then they come home and they also have more work to do. So a lot of the times these kids, their love of learning is being destroyed and their spirits are being crushed because they're just not able to pursue the things that they want to learn, or they have like learners burnout where they're constantly learning, their brain just can't process it, so they become over what is it, over stimulated. And I was an overstimulated kid. If we went to a mall, I was overstimulated. I would shut down. If we did too many subjects in one day as a kid, I would shut down. But these kids are learned and programmed to just accept it. And if they start acting out or they start having big emotions or they start being over sensitized or decent whatever, then it's like, "Oh no, like that's not, you have to learn to control that because like you have to do well in this test and you have to figure this out and that out." And it's like these poor kids are just becoming numb at a very young age to just get by in school. And then on top of that, there was a study done from Our World in Data, and it says moms spend about 2 hours of quality time with their kids a day, and dads spend about an hour and a half of quality time every day with their kids. Let me just read that again. Moms spend 2 hours of quality time with their kids, and dads spend 1.5 hours of quality time with their kids every day. Now, this does not include eating or drinking or bathing or whatever. Like those are health, like those are care and needs. This is actually like sitting down, talking with your kid, telling them, about your day, them telling you about honest, genuine conversation and connecting with your kid 2 hours a day. How often are the kids with complete strangers or kids their own age? And because kids are constantly around their own age, they don't learn how to interact with the younger kids or the older kids or the adults. They're kind of stuck in that bubble, and so it makes it really difficult to mature. Which I think is the reason that, a lot of generations have had a hard time maturing, right? And so it's interesting to me to see the statistics, and I agree that an hour and a half seems kind of high for some families, but this is, statistics speaking. So for me, I look at that and I'm like, so you're wondering why your kid has behavioral issues. I mean, there's other things like diet and nutrition and getting outside and stuff like that plays a role too, but you wonder why your kid is having major behavioral issues. I'm not talking about a tantrum here or there. Kids have tantrums, I'm not talking about, a kid crying once in a while or having big emotions once in a while. Kids are going to have big emotions because they don't know how to regulate themselves yet, and that's why it's so important for parents to be able to stay calm and regulate. And that's something I'm still learning. I'm obviously not a parent, but I am a babysitter, and it's not something that I'm always good at. It's something sometimes I get irritated. Sometimes I'm like, okay, you guys just stop, please, whatever. But I mean, I do my best to apologize when necessary. And I never yell, I never get angry with them specifically. It's just like, okay, you need to stop, reevaluate, think about this decision, calm down a little bit. Um, but if you are only spending 2 hours of quality time with your kids, and keep in mind, this is based off of a one-on-one ratio. So parents, a lot of the times, have more than one kid, right? So sometimes those 2 hours is split between two kids, and those two kids only get 1 hour each of mom or a half hour of dad, basically. So then people wonder why their kids have such behavioral issues. And they're just like, oh, I wonder what that could be about. Like they're acting out, da 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 da, this, da da da. It's because you're not spending time with them. They're not learning how to be well rounded people because they're not spending time with their parents. And a lot of the times, again, the parents are off on trips. They're not even around. That's why they hire live in nannies and things of that nature to help with the kids that they created but then passed off to somebody else to raise. And then when that kid becomes a teenager and the mom's like, oh, finally, like, I can hang out with you and stuff, the teenager's like, who are you? And I don't know you and you don't know me, so you can't tell me what to do, etc. Behavioral issues. And I do believe that 99% of behavioral issues could be solved if families sat down at the end of the day together and ate dinner and talked about their day and they actually had a heart to heart connection. A lot of families don't have that. And I've been blessed that with the families I've babysat for over the years since I was 13, almost every single one of the families have had present moms and dads who have always put their kids first, and they have those family dinners, they talk about, they connect. But then there were a few that I have babysat in the past, and I couldn't the kids were uncontrollable. I could not they wouldn't listen to authority, they wouldn't listen to me, they wouldn't listen to their mom, and their mom would just throw up their hands and be like, "You know what? If she gets paint on the ceiling, it is what it is, like, I don't really care." And it's very interesting to see how the kids who have dads who are present in their lives are well behaved as opposed to the kids who only have a mom in their life, and not just that, but a mom who's working. So the dad's off traveling for business, whatever, whatever, and the mom is the sole authority in the house when the dad's gone, and the kids just, without a dad present, they just don't respect their mom. And it's very hard for her to figure that out and to do that. And so a lot of the times moms just go, "Whoop." Because especially with dads are supposed to back up the mom. If the kid does something and the mom does a punishment or something, then the dad has to back up the mom and be like, "You don't talk to your mother that way. Like, this is the punishment. You know why? Blah, blah, blah. No TV." But if you don't have that system and you don't have your husband backing you up, it makes things so much more difficult. So, my favorite things about homeschooling and why I think more parents need to be doing it and need to take their kids out of the public school system for I mean, for starters, you know, school shootings. I mean, there's that, right? Actually, just recently, today, a couple hours ago, in my neighborhood, well, not my neighborhood, a neighboring neighborhood, there was a robbery, a thief with a stolen car or whatever, and the cops have chased him throughout basically all of the neighborhoods around here. And two schools had to go on lockdown because the robbers got out of their car and started running towards those schools. And so they had them on instant lockdown. And n- that's obviously a little bit different, but nonetheless, like, we know since the Columbine, we know Sandy Hook, we all know these situations and stories, and it's just awful. Um, and then on top of that, you know, everything else that I've mentioned since then, it's just not really a safe environment in general. We see the bullying. There was a little girl that was beat up like real badly because she was white and she wasn't Muslim. There was a girl who basically, you guys remember it. Was an, she got into an altercation with another girl and she was smashed into the pavement and she started seizing because obviously if you have a brain injury you start to seize, and she was in really bad condition for a really long time. I don't know what happened. I heard that she eventually became stable, but she has to relearn to walk and all of that stuff. There are so many instances of bullying creating a lot of mental health issues. And honestly, you can get rid of a lot of mental health issues by not giving them a phone. I think that should be the number one thing. You should not be giving your kid a phone until they're 18, personally. I think 16 is okay minimum if you want to give your kid a phone. I'd say 16 isn't ideal, but it's better than like 12, 13, or 14. But the ideal age would be 18 because social media is not meant for kids. Social media is not meant for anyone under the age of 18. And the girl who literally invented social media said this: it's not for kids, it's meant for adults. Any parents who let their kids have social media, this is my words, not hers, is in a way child abuse, in my opinion, especially if it's not monitored. If you just give your kid a phone and you have no monitors, you have no parent guidelines set up. And keep in mind, kids are really sneaky. They can get around parent locks and all of this stuff. They know how. And so people are always like, "Oh my gosh, my kid just keeps getting past the password and like I don't know what to do and she has these apps I don't know about." And I'm like, "Easy solution. Take the phone away. She's 8. She doesn't need a phone. She doesn't need to be texting strangers online. None of these kids need that at all, right? You want to get them a phone, give them a flip phone. Just saying." But also with homeschooling, you have the freedom to choose to teach your kids what you want to teach them. And I'm not saying like, "Oh, you can't teach them certain subjects." No, you still have to teach them certain subjects, but that they're not going to be learning about all the LGBTQ agenda. They're not gonna be called homophobic by their friends or whatever. They're not gonna be introduced to any of that degeneracy at such a young age that it corrupts them and gets basically ruins their childhood. Um, and there are options like online schools, and kids can pursue their actual interests. I got to pursue a ton of my actual interests, and then eventually I figured out what I actually liked to do and what I didn't. And that's really important too, especially for kids at such a young age. I think, it's really a time when you need to explore and they need to figure out, okay, what is it that I'm really interested in? There's girls that are really interested in soccer. There's girls that are really interested in music or theater or a bunch of different things. And a lot of the times they don't know that they have these interests until they're at extracurricular activities or they're older. And I just think that those interests could be cultivated and inspired a lot sooner. Um, so there's that. Would I recommend online high school? It depends on what kind of person you are, and I think it depends on the high school because I went to 2 schools. One school was just get your basically assignments in by the end of the year. Second school was every single week there's a deadline. You have to get it in by Monday of, whatever week at 11:59 p.m. Um, and so I preferred the weekly deadline as opposed to the yearly deadline because I definitely just let things go way too far, and it was overwhelming because I was new to online school and I didn't completely understand how it worked. So when I switched to Queen of Heaven Academy, that's when I really started thriving. I still hated school, but I started thriving in it better because I had deadlines and the teachers were a lot better. I had Zoom calls instead of teaching myself the assignments. So that was really helpful. I also started working, and I think that's another thing that people need to do more often. High schoolers should be working. I mean, I was working since I was 12. I was a babysitter, and I constantly just worked. I babysat a family of, I think, like 8, but only the youngest ones, and there were at that time, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. So I babysat 5 kids when I was 11. And then I babysat 3 kids. And then I kind of babysat on and off 2 kids, and then the 4 girls I've been babysitting for about 8 years now. Um, so it's just interesting. And for me, I just felt like being able to work really helped me to understand how money works. It also gave me the freedom to be able to buy things that I wanted and how to save money and I just said that. Save money and just overall have a better appreciation for what my parents paid for, and then I could also help pay for certain things. Oftentimes they wouldn't let me, which is, very sweet of them, but a lot of the times I would try. And then I also got to learn a lot of things that kids these days don't learn. I learned how to write checks. I learned how to change a tire. I learned safety skills like CPR. I learned a lot of different things. I learned real world math and I still use it till this day. And, at the end of the day, if you need to hire a tutor or you need hired help as a stay at home mom, like get hired help. Maybe not all the time, but figure out when you might need it. Hire a tutor if you feel like you're not able to teach your kids certain subjects, whatever it might be. But you can also find a method that works for you. There's the Charlotte method. There's Seton, Elizabeth Ann Seton. There's a bunch of different methods that you could research and try. Um, but overall, I just think that it's way better for kids, and people are going to agree slash disagree with me because of their own experiences. But I'm talking about the whole of kids, right? The majority of kids have depression and mental issues and anxiety. Mm, uh, a lot of the kids have eating disorders already, and they're only 8, 9, and 10. So, if even though you might have had a good experience, um, it doesn't mean that that's the same for the kids today. Because I was homeschooled, obviously, but That was a long time ago. That was more than a decade ago. Things have changed, especially society-wise. I mean, we see how the changes have happened. There's been infiltration of the LGBTQ stuff. There has just been so much. And these poor kids are just getting bombarded constantly. And so just because you had a good experience, I totally understand. And I had a really good experience too when I went to school for a little bit. But at this point, it's become so bad that we can't even recognize the school system anymore. When we went to school, we were like the last ones that came out somewhat unscathed. These poor kids that are going in now, like late Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're coming out with so many problems. And it just breaks my heart to see how many kids are struggling with mental health issues. I didn't even know what mental health was when I was a kid. Their childhoods are being ripped from them. And it's just sad to see. And so that's why I'm very staunch about homeschooling. I think that if you can do it, you should do it. And there have been so many moms who have said, I'd never homeschool. And then they started homeschooling and said they'd never go back. And they see a complete change in their kids. They see how they fall back in love with life and they see how they're less stressed and less anxious. And, kids don't deserve to be, constantly having mental health issues. They don't deserve that. They don't deserve to wake up at a time when their bodies clearly aren't ready to learn, forced to go through school for 8 hours, and then come back and maybe have lunch with your family or maybe not, go off to extracurricular activities. And it's just really sad. They never get any family time. And then people wonder why they have so many issues. And so I just think that it's really important that parents really prioritize their children because they are the future. And if we're not putting the time and effort into them now to become well-rounded human beings and to raise them up right and to raise them to know God and to love Our Lady, we failed because what's the number one thing you should be doing as a parent? Getting your kid to heaven. And unfortunately, the school systems don't really cultivate a God, safe environment where you can talk about God or you can pray or you can do anything of that. God has been removed from most schools, and if not all of them, even some Catholic ones, which is very hard to say and witness. But I definitely think that it's just a big issue that needs to be fixed. And so now we're going to go to the comments. I know you guys have been kind of like lighting up the comment section. I love kind of skimming and reading it. I haven't really been able to respond until right now. The other thing with public schools, though, is a lot of drugs. Kids come into school high on narcotics. The bathroom is constantly full of kids vaping and snorting things off the countertops. I didn't notice it as bad because I made friends with good people, but it was there and noticeable. It is so insane that it's happening in high schools. I so I didn't go to, but I had a lot of friends who was in this specific high school in this area, and it's infamous for being really, really bad. And basically what happened is every single week they would have dogs go through the halls and sniff out drugs every week. And some of my friends got caught and I was like, I didn't even know you did drugs. Like, but then again, that explains their behavior and then it would make a lot of sense. But I would be like, what? Like, are you guys crazy? Hi, Maddie. Hi, sweetie. I don't know if this is a great topic for you to be listening to, but I love you. So I think especially with that, it's I don't know. It's hard because even in good schools, like prestigious schools, public schools, private schools, whatever, you're going to run into that. And I've already witnessed that. I've already started seeing that. And there's so many kids that are just being scandalized, and being introduced to things that they shouldn't even know about. I mean, even as teenagers, you shouldn't know about a lot of this stuff, but they're being introduced to it. And it's just very sad to see. Um, Yep, exactly. It's just interesting how stuff like that happens. And, we know vaping is really bad. It has nickel. That's the thing though. Remember when vapes were all the rage? Like there were constant vaping commercials. Oh, you have to get it. Like it's so good. You could get it in all these different flavors. Now there's no vaping commercials, but now there are how to quit vaping commercials because there's high levels of nicotine. It creates irritability. It creates anxiety. It causes a lot of mental health issues. Not just that, but also there's heavy metals like nickel in it, and it's causing major health issues in young people. Sometimes people have said that vaping is worse than smoking, and I think they're about the same, to be honest. I wouldn't do either of them, but I definitely don't think they're good. Um, but I just see so many kids, when I was in high school, high school, when I was a part of a group, almost every single one of my friends had a vape. It's a blessing and surprising to me how I never tried a vape or any of that stuff when I was in high school because I was constantly surrounded by it and I was just like, looks weird. No, thank you." Like that's a blessing in itself that I didn't even have a want to. And I was peer pressured a lot, but I was just like, "No, sorry. I don't want to, you know?" And all my other friends got addicted to it. A lot of them started doing other things too. And I still was just like, "No, not really interested in that. Sorry. Let me go climb this tree over here." Um, and so yeah, a lot of the kids would just be vaping and they'd do the whole like shirt thing so that they, wouldn't get caught. And I'm just like, "Ugh, you guys are so dumb." But also that's looking back on it and realizing like, oh, we thought we were really getting away with something back then. And it's like, nope, you guys weren't getting away with anything. So it's just very interesting. And yeah. So anyways, that's all I have for this live stream. But really appreciate you guys hopping on and listening to my little rant about homeschooling and why you should homeschool your future kids or the kids you have currently. Definitely most of, if not all of my kids are going to be homeschooled up until high school. And then after that, if they want to go to a private Catholic school, that's actually a good school. Max and I are going to be very, very adamant about being involved in what they're learning and what kind of school it is, then yes. But I definitely think raising kids from babies until they're like high school age is really fundamental and really important for them to be able to kind of just springboard off of that and decide where they want to go in life. But hopefully they have a good enough foundation that they're not going to fall down bad holes or go down different roads that are really bad for them. And I know a lot of kids that because they were so sheltered as homeschoolers, they went off to college and now they do drugs and they're smoking, they get tattoos, they have sex and all this other stuff. And it's just so interesting to see because they were usually the ones that picked on me for being scandalous because my shirt was slightly off my shoulder. It was a style back in the early 2000s. I don't want to hear it. Um, and so it was interesting to me to see how different our lives were because I wasn't sheltered and they were sheltered. And so they always picked on me for knowing things I probably shouldn't have as a teen, but I did anyways. And I learned how to deal with those things properly, though, and not let them control my life or, really read into them too much. And then they went off to college and just kind of, went off the deep end. So very interesting to witness, but I definitely think, it's important not to shelter kids. I think, let kids be kids. Don't let them know things that they shouldn't know or be introduced to things they shouldn't know. But it's like, when girls start becoming a woman, if you know what I mean, that's when you give them the sex talk. You know what I mean? So it's not like, oh, my daughter has to know about this in first grade because she's going to hear about it from other kids. And it's like, you don't have to worry about that with homeschooling usually because you're there with your kid during play dates. You know the parents, or you should know the parents. If you don't know the parents, that's not great. And you should know who your kid is hanging out with, so that you know what to expect and know what conversations you'll have to have with the kids. Um, I'm rambling on again. The point is, homeschooling is great, and I see a lot of people doing it, and I highly suggest people do it for their future kids if you have kids right now, etc. I don't know why my face has been so red this entire time. I mean, I know I'm blushing, but I don't know why. Maybe it's the caffeine. I don't know. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. I'm gonna go eat some dinner, and I will talk to you guys in the next live stream. Yes, thank you so much for being here, guys. I appreciate you. Bye.